Alright, X. You probably won't believe me, as I'm not even sure myself if I believe it. But I'm going to tell you this. You guys are the only people who won't immediately dismiss my story as insane, but you don't have to stay here, so keep that in mind. I've written this all out in advance, for both your and my own convenience, and there are too many aspects to try and take the time to post this as I write it. My family has a history of mental illness. This is what I'm going to start off with, as a bit of a disclaimer to you all. My uncle killed himself. My grandfather blew his own brains out. My mother is bipolar. My father's father used to sexually assault people. The list goes on. So anyways, this all starts off about 2 months ago, on the last day of the semester for college. Now, I normally get a ride home as the walk is a bit long, but today, my mother, she picks me up and I live with her, I know, couldn't use your car at the time due to repair issues, so I was stuck walking this time. The path I went on is a bit of a back way on a gravel road surrounded by trees. I decided to go this way because it was the same distance and it was hot, so I figured the trees would provide me with some shade. So off I go on my merry way in sandals. The rocks on the ground getting stuck in my toes and stabbing my feet. After what I estimate about 15 minutes, I accidentally stepped into a muddy hole and promptly yelled out a multitude of obscenities. So now I had to not only walk home, but walk with one leg covered in mud. Continuing, I trudged on, with drying mud on my foot only to yet again walk into another hole. After this point, things started to become familiar. Yes, you know where this is going. The trees were the same, the road was the same, and yet again, I stepped into the same mud hole. Now, I frequently visit X. My first thought was that this was something paranormal. Although I admit I was disturbed, I trudged back down the path in hopes that I'd find myself at the college again. To my dismay, I did not. Instead, I had come across the same mud hole from the opposite direction. So at this point, I was starting to panic. Many thoughts began racing through my head. Would I be stuck in the strange loop and die here? Was there something waiting for me in the trees? Am I going insane? I immediately ran down the path as fast as I could. I even left behind my bags and books, and ran with every ounce of my energy that I had. As expected, I ran past my own pile of junk several times before I decided to sit next to it and try to rationalize everything out. I stayed vigilant of my surroundings and made a point to look around me for anything at all that stood out. At this point, I thought, what if I just go through the trees here? And I began thinking this is all a game, looking for any loopholes or solutions out of this. So I walked through a seemingly endless stream of trees, only to end up on the other side, staring at my books. I have severe anxiety, and this entire situation was making me sick. I stopped and blew my entire lunch up before sitting down again. Finally, in my desperation, I tried to climb one of the trees. I made it a decent way up before promptly falling from it and landing on my back. It arched, but I was okay. So I laid there, feeling like I was going to die. I then fell asleep, and after an unknown period of sleeping, I awoke to a man standing over me, asking if I was okay. I looked around and looked at him, with a terrified look in my face. He asked me again if I needed to go to a hospital, and all I said was, no, just take me home. Although he was admittedly concerned, he let me pack up my stuff in his truck, and drove me down the path. Only this time, instead of ending up in a loop, we actually came out of the loop and onto the next street, and he drove me home. I grabbed my stuff and walked into my house. I expected my mom to ask me why I'd been gone for so long, but she simply said hello and continued on about her business. I looked at the clock in the living room and found that it had only been 30 minutes since I left the college. I was both exhausted and afraid. So I went to my room, locked the door, and laid on my bed thinking about what just happened. So I went to sleep and woke up the next day, the first day of summer for me. I was too afraid to tell anyone about what happened, and decided to ignore it and hope that it had all been a very vivid hallucination. The next week or two went by fairly uneventful, and although the whole scenario was still in my mind, I was starting to think that the heat was just causing my mind to play tricks on me, that things were okay. Lol, too bad for me. I was either very wrong, or my brain decided it was time to fuck me in the ass. strange events began happening, not as over the top as the first event, but unsettling. Nonetheless, I saw extremely dark figures roaming the halls, something out of the corner of my eye. Other times, they would walk right in front of me before disappearing, and every time, nobody else in my house could see them. It began happening more and more frequently, and I even considered telling the story to you guys about a month ago, but I figured I'd be disregarded as a troll. As it went on, even stranger things began occurring. I began losing chunks of time. I'd finish lunch, and less than a minute later, I'd look out the window to see darkness, and my mom would be preparing dinner. Then, events began elongating. I went into my room one afternoon and laid there for a good couple of hours, just staring at the ceiling before talking, what felt like a several-hour nap. And then I awoke. I looked at the clock to find it had been no more than 5 minutes. More recently, the most disturbing and unsettling of these events began happening. I had still told no one about what was going on, so I tried to act fine in front of my family. I was sitting down, eating dinner, and when I finished, I walked down the hall to my room silently before closing my door. I saw, and I am absolutely fucking certain of this, myself walking down the hall. Myself walking down the hall. I was looking at myself walk down the hall, and I saw myself walk into the bathroom. I ran down, opened the bathroom door to find nobody in there. I ran into the dining room to find everyone gone. I ran into the dining room to find everybody gone, no food on the table, and thought it should have been nighttime. The sun was rising, and it was morning. This began occurring more often. And even worse, I'll end up in places I don't remember being, and with no clue of when I was there. I'll be doing one thing, and suddenly, I'm no longer there, and I'm somewhere else. On one occasion, I was on my laptop, suddenly finding myself standing in the Walmart, and I saw myself walking away in front of me with a carton of groceries. I went up to a cashier and asked them if I just checked out my groceries with them, and they said I had. I ran out of the store and found my mom in the car with groceries packed in the car already, and she turns to me and tells me to hurry up and get in the car like nothing had happened. My life has become one horrifying event. Days bleed into each other. Things that have already happened happen again. I see copies of myself, or even other people walking away from something while the other is still doing it. It's like time itself is collapsing on itself, and I'm the only one who notices it. I'm frankly at the end of my rope, and have no idea what the fuck is going on. The only reason I think I can keep this thread going, because I've been able to find certain times where things remain fairly normal. However, everything is slowly becoming more and more bizarre, and I'm scared about what's going to happen next. The only reason I'm even telling you guys all this is because I have to tell someone, or I'm going to kill myself. I might do it anyways. Like I said, you guys probably not believe any of this. All I know is that whether this is real, or I'm just going insane, I don't think I'll put up with it any longer. Hopefully, Annie myself will at least go without any issues.